All right, folks. Welcome to PRT. Join us in the real reality. Let's see if we get this going here, dude. Probably wondering what's going on, why we're doing a regular show tonight instead of the Patreon. And I'll explain it to you. So I got a late start. I was exhausted, man, and I had to take Nellie to a doctor's appointment. And what ended up happening, I got 3 hours of sleep. And so I asked my wife, I asked her if she would wake me up. I said, let me get 30 minutes here. I need 30 minutes. And then I wake up and we're already an hour behind. And so I had to get my ass in gear. That's what's going on here. So we only got 54 yeah, whatever. We'll be fine. We'll get some people in here. Hang on. I was up all day, man. After I got back from the appointment, I had a lot to do. I had a very productive day. I spent the day arguing with people online. That's a productive day. That's you know, talk to some interesting people, some people that are kind of famous too. Actually, I talked to a few famous people today because I was in there arguing and stuff. And there's people's pages, and you're just like, hey, So I said some things, and got acknowledged. Wasn't trying to. I was just, it's what we talk about is the real reality. People don't want to live in the real reality. They want to live in this, bullshit matrix that they've given us. I'm not into that. I shouldn't say the S word. I'm trying not to curse. I'm trying to turn over a new leaf and not be a cursing guy. Not into that shit. That's it. Done with all the bullshit. Damn it. I said it again. It's not working. I need to stop. I'm trying to stop myself. So I got a few things I want to say. So it's going to be, I'm going to bring my guest on here. I got a guest because I was doing Arizona, and one of my really good friends in this field is Chris Kramer. And I thought, you know what? He's had in encounters near the Mogollon Rim. My apologies to Matt and Mitch. I was going to do y'all's tonight on Patreon. Not that they were going to watch. I mean, they're not. One of them lives in Maine now. The other one lives in Florida. But I was going to do their encounter from Arizona tonight on the Patreon, and maybe another person's if I had time. But it was near the Mogollon Rim. And so what better way to do it, though, than to just bring Chris Kramer on and let him talk about it? Because I had a few questions for him, and it is the Bigfoot and the nature of reality. So I thought, let's bring Kramer on and we can talk about this. And we're going to not just, you know how we do it here. We're not just going to talk about just sticking to Bigfoot. We're probably going to talk about all kinds of stuff. And that's how it goes. And this was, like I said, it was going to be the Patreon. You might get 60 people in the Patreon, but eventually you'll probably pull, I mean, if, I don't know how your Patreon is, but you'll probably pull several hundred people to watch it. Eventually you'll get around to watching it. But I figured this one, I'd let everybody in on it because not only was I running late, but I just thought that what's going on right now in the field with the Patterson-Gimlin thing and all that, it's a big thing. I got my own opinions about it, and I'm going to express those. But I'm going to bring my guest on, and I'm going to let him, say hello. Everybody knows Chris Kramer. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. Talk to some very interesting people today. Let's see what happens here. Let's bring on what Kramer. What's happening?
Better late than never, brother.
For you though, it's not so bad. What is it, 7:00 over there?
Yeah, it's 7:15, which is prime time. It's all good, man. Glad to be here. Good to see you, brother. It's been a minute.
See you. I told you what would happen to me. So I had this weird synchronicity. So I was driving down this road I haven't been in years. And the last time, I remember, actually, I was there about 4 or 5 years ago because somebody had been on my show and they were talking about it. And it's called Hairy Man Road. So I hadn't been there in years, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I turned around, did a YouTube. My wife's like, I'm hungry. And I'm like, again? Like, it's Thursday. So she was complaining. She's like, I'm hungry. So it was like an all night place, right there. And I said, okay, doing the patrol. And I was doing research at the same time. I was listening to a thing, this guy was talking. So I decided to do it, and I was just kind of zoning out. And I look up and I see the road, and it's literally named after Bigfoot sightings. I'm not even joking, and it's right there in Round Rock, right on. It used to be on the outskirts of Round Rock, Texas. Now it's just kind of one of those pockets, the forest, because where I live, everything's a big forest, right? So you could just be driving and you run into like a wooded area, so nobody around. And so I told my wife, and I was like, this looks familiar. Where am I at? And so my friend Starscream, who did the security at my conference, he had some weird thing happen to him and his brother there. And then my friend Willie had the same thing, him and his brother. And so there are many people who have claimed to have seen weird stuff out there. And in fact, I got one from a guy not too long ago, from my one of my cousin's friends, and he was telling me at Thanksgiving, he was like, right over off of Harryman Road. And so I told my wife, I said, we got to come back when we got time, when we're not doing the job. And let's take a look at this place. At the same time, I'm thinking about the episode here in Arizona, and I was going over my friend Mitch's encounter at the Mogollon Rim, and he had some crazy stuff that they happened to them. That's a whole episode in of itself. So I was like thinking about it, and I was talking to Nellie, Anthony, and Tony, and we were talking about it, and I said, "Oh shoot, we're on Harryman Road," and then you popped into my head. I was like, "Dude, Chris Kramer is Arizona," and Nellie was like, "Yeah, you could get him on and let him talk about the Mogollon Rim." So I said, "You know what? That'd be a great idea," and then I could just retell Matt and Mitch's story later on. They don't care. I don't know Matt personally, but I know Mitch, and I've known him for years. But his friend Matt was with him when this happened. And so a lot of people don't realize that Arizona is heavily wooded in those areas. They do not realize that. I spent a lot of time in that area, near the rim, and it's the Grand Canyon, right? So you got the Grand Canyon right there, and near Flagstaff, all of that area, you have like 1,000,000 acres of freaking woods,
Huge.
Huge. And people don't realize, because Arizona is so damn big. It's like Montana. You could drive for a couple days, you see another person, but there is a lot of territory to cover there. And so when I started going through the Arizona file, Anthony, I told you this. I was like, how many of these sightings do we have near the Mogollon? So we thought there was like 2 or 3 besides Mitch and Matt. No, in our file there was 26.
Easy.
And that's not counting your stuff. So then I was going like, dude. So I was actually watching Paranormal Paul earlier, and then I was watching Hellbent Holler, and I kept telling myself, I got to go to sleep. I got to go to sleep. I got to go to sleep, take a nap. But I didn't trust Nellie to wake me up. And sure enough, she was doing something else. And she's kind of, oh, I'm sorry. I let you oversleep. I was like, yeah. And so but here I am. Oh, there's Paul. Paul's actually in the chat, man. There's Paranormal Paul right there. Yeah, he had Bryce Edwards on his show. Bryce Edwards, good. Bryce is here too. Bryce Edwards is right there. Good guy. I like his encounters. I was checking it out, and good guys, do good work in the field. Hellbent Holler was on there, and while I was watching them, somebody started trolling them, and I was like, hey, here we go, because they love to attack people who do real work. I think you guys and Hellbent and and a few others do real field work, like actual field work. And to the naysayers that say that I don't, bull crap, I do it too. I just don't like video it all the time and whatever. But I do go to these places, and Harryman Road is definitely going to be one of them. But it all kind of came full circle. And as I was getting to the 4-way or the crossroads, and I was like, I told Nellie, I said, you know what, right there at that crossroads, I said, I'm going to contact Kramer. Well, I should have contacted you yesterday, but I was like, I got really busy. And then it was like late. She's like, did you contact Chris? And I said, crap. Like the last minute. And lucky for me, I caught you not going to somewhere, running around. And so you said, yeah, I'll come on tonight. So here we are, folks. It was kind of the last second thing. And I thought, why just put it on the Patreon where maybe 1,000 people will eventually see it, where we could do it here. Thousands of people will eventually see it. So here we are. Chris Kramer. So the first thing I got to ask you, and I got to ask, is very important. This is probably the most important question that's going to be.
I know where this is going.
Well, I mean, I've been praying for you, and so are you still an Eagles fan? Because that's, we got to.
My friend, there's no redemption for me there. I mean,
It's
like
never too
I was,
late, Chris. It's
I
never
was,
too
I was,
late.
I was cursed generations beforehand. It's kind of like being descended from the Nephilim. You're damned from the curse of your father.
He's an LEU.
Yes.
Yeah, he's an Ollie.
I
Yeah.
actually had an Eagles hat that I was going to wear just to start the show with, but I put it down somewhere like
Wow.
20 minutes ago. I don't know where I put it. So you get stuck with the Arizona hat instead.
I'm going to
But
say
yes.
something. I promise you guys. Okay, I'm going to tell you this. The Cowboys are revamping their defense, and every year the Cowboys fans like, "Oh, we're going to the Super Bowl." Bullshit. Shut up. I don't know that they're going to go to the Super Bowl, but I do think they're going to win the division. So I'll make you a friendly bet right now.
They'll take it. I mean, it's genetic. We don't really have a choice in the matter.
The Cowboys will win the division. I'm not going to say they're going to go to the Super Bowl. They will win that division. And the Eagles, they look like they're kind of going in reverse a little bit. I don't know what's going on.
I don't know what Howie's doing, man. I mean, we're letting some guys go that I didn't think we'd let go, but I trust Howie Roseman. He's been a solid GM. We've been in contention.
Better than our GM.
For a long time, man, or whatever he is, vice president of football operations. Same darn thing, right?
Yeah.
At least we got the important stuff out of the way, though.
Yeah, our GM thinks he's the president of the
Isn't he?
Freaking Jerry Jones.
Isn't I hope Jerry lives to be 110, dude. Like I never want him to change.
I know everybody.
I love him.
The enemies love Jerry Jones.
I love him. I love him. He's just the best.
Yeah, he could just keep destroying us. It's like
keep doing what you're doing.
Well, he's got his son now already in line, and he's already talking about, free agency doesn't solve anything. Yeah, but if you have holes you plug, you need to.
I think free agency can solve a lot of things. Look at quarterbacks that have won the Super Bowl in the last couple of years. Most of them were free agents, other than Jalen. I mean, Matt Stafford and the Sam Darnold. Who saw that coming? You know what I mean? Like, come on. So that's not necessarily true, Jerry. But you keep thinking that. That's what we like.
Well, that was Steven. That was the next in line. So he's going to be obviously
the three-headed monster. they're like Art Davis's kids, just cuckoo clocks,
And that guy, if you want to hear something funny, the guy, if you look this guy up, Art Davis's son, he looks like a giant Chucky doll. And he's got this really pretty wife, and they're like, well, what do you
I know.
This guy asked him a question. Put him on the spot. Well, how did you get such a beautiful wife? She liked my smile. It dude has no.
I saw that on Facebook last year. I'm like, you look like you're missing a chromosome, dude. Like, who are you kidding?
Like, bizarre? What do you look at? How could you look at yourself with that pumpkin pie haircut and then think that woman was interested in anything other than you being a billionaire?
Brother, a couple extra zeros in that bank account hide a lot of ugly sin, man.
That'll make you look good. I mean, really good. But anyway, I couldn't believe that Chucky doll had the nerve to say that. But the only thing they have is Max Crosby, and they're wheeling and dealing trying to make a team out of it. But I guess they snookered the Ravens, but because he was his ACL or his meniscus, it wasn't healed. And then they said, "Oh no," and it was one of the Cowboys doctors who had checked him, and they said, "No, he's not healed." And so then the Ravens backed out. So I don't know if they're going to try to get upset with them for tampering or what, but that doctor was just doing what he said was correct. Like the Ravens asked him, why did you back out? And he said, well, his meniscus isn't healed. So I love Crosby. I think he's a great guy. And I love the Raiders, but he needs to get away from them and go to an organization that's going to win. And that doesn't mean going to either one of our teams. I can tell you that.
We lost a guy to the Raiders too. Yesterday, the day before, was it N'Kobe Dean or one of them cats decided to go to play for those guys. Have fun.
They're in so much
trouble. That's where free agents go to die.
Yeah, I hate it, man. I wish that the Raiders would do something, but oh well, here we are. You're not wearing green, even though you're an Eagles fan and it's St. Patrick's Day.
And I'm Irish as well. Oh. I don't have a green Arizona 4 shirt. I had to plug a little bit, so you get the blue.
I had to wear mine.
I bet you know what, dude? Like we didn't cook corned beef this year. Normally, this is our holiday. When I was back in the day, like we'd start celebrating St. Patrick's Day about the last week in February and run right through to April. So,
I thought that was kind of
changed.
part of being an Irish hooligan in Philadelphia, though. That was part of it. You
I resemble all of that.
exactly like a leprechaun, you know. So here we go, Chris. Let's get started. I have a question, though, a serious question. So the Mogollon Rim, when we were talking earlier, you know, when we had a phone conversation, and you were talking about the Mogollon monster, right? And so I mentioned something on the show last night, and people were like, "Well, what is the Mogollon? It's a Bigfoot type creature, right?"
It's Sasquatch.
Sasquatch, yeah. But there's another creature that I might get into that too. There's another one that people see, and it's like this giant lizard-like thing, but it's on 4 legs. So that supposedly, I think that's an actual species that lives in that area, and people see it pretty frequently, and it's pretty terrifying. They can be between the size of a medium-sized dog to like a size of a like a small horse, and so
I haven't had that encounter, but I've had enough of the other ones. The history. First off, we are going through a pronunciation for you. It is like Muggy, Muggy. Mogollon, the Mogollon Rim.
Okay, so from now on, when I say the Mogollon monster, I'm going to continue to say that. I'll make sure to remember the pronunciation.
Remember to do it on purpose now.
The Mogollon monster, yeah, the Mogollon monster, guys. Let me say it a few more times. Mogollon monster,
Mogollon monster.
You know, if you watch the show, you know I don't pronunciate shit.
You do great. Everybody knows what you're talking about. There's only one Mongolian monster in Arizona, so
it's the Mongolian death worm, right? All right. So let's get started here. So you tell me, like, what the history? Do you know the history of this thing? Because I do not.
Well as anyone does.
Okay.
I believe I do.
All right. Well, let's get started with that. Let's see what we can do.
So the Mogollon Rim, which is where we're talking about, is a geographical formation that begins basically in the town of Prescott, where I live, and runs west to east, east to west, almost all the way to New Mexico, to the White Mountains, and it's known as it's like I said, the end of the Colorado Shelf, and that whole area from where I live straight across is home to 3 national forests that all converge there. There's Coconino National Forest, Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, and right below the Mogollon Rim is Tonto National Forest, and these are vast wilderness areas.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah, they are huge. This country along the Mogollon Rim was Apache country, and in many ways it still is. There's multiple Apache reservations that are scattered across that east to west segment. You know, all on the west side, you have the White Mountain Apaches. You've got the ones in Camp Verde. So their lore surrounding the hairy man, just like every other First Nations tribe, coast to coast, north, south, east to west, they have a huge hairy man story and a huge hairy man lore that goes with, their spiritual beliefs, So between taking deep dives into the native aspect of the Mogollon monster, as well as the name itself, Mogollon monster, stems from the settlers, the timbermen and the settlers that first settled this area back in the mid 1800s, and they, the area along the Mogollon Rim was a huge timber industry area. Payson, Arizona, which sits below it, that was their bread and butter for 100 years, and they're the ones who coined the phrase the Mogollon monster. It was the settlers and the tree guys that were having these encounters while they're working up in the forest up in the Mogollon Rim. And when you start to some of the initial stories of the Mogollon monster were a little bit more far-fetched, I think, for sensationalism from the local newspapers back in those days. But the gist of them, they were all talking about between a 7 and 9 foot hairy bipedal mannish apish creature that they would have these encounters with. That is consistent anywhere where there's a Sasquatch story, right? But when we started to take dives into this, when I joined the Arizona Floor 7 years ago, and there was a kind of a different iteration. Some of the guys aren't there anymore. Some of them still are. But the longer term guys, one of them, this is one of my favorite stories. So some of this is going to sound kind of kooky, but it stands up. Over the course of my time and interaction that I've had and that some of these other guys have, is we've been established enough of a rapport over time at some of these locations where we've been given names that we can call these people, these entities, right? And they're interesting names, but about a third of them, the last suffix of their name has the term GAN in it, like GAN or GAAN, right? And we always thought that was interesting. We felt like if they had, like, there was a Terragan, there was an Eaden GAN, there was a lot of these GAN types, and then ones that didn't have it. So a couple of years after we started documenting these names, writing them down, keeping a list of them as we could. One of the guys with the Arizona 4 was a museum guide in Payson, and he brought us into the museum one time, me and the rest of the guys from the Arizona 4, and took us to a section of the museum that had a whole kind of display talking about the Apaches' culture and their belief systems. And on this big plaque, there was some signage that read, "The Apaches revered and worshipped the spirits of the mountains and the forest." And the name of these spirits was known as the GAN. So alarm bells and aha moments start popping off. And we all started researching just what the GAN were. And there was a lot of stuff online about the GAN, but in essence, they're talking about Sasquatch. They're talking about the hairy man. These were entities that were part flesh and part spiritual being. They weren't known as being malicious. Like I said, these were the Apaches believed that these GAN entities watched over the Apache people. They were a huge part of I believe they still are for the traditionalists, still a huge part of their spiritual belief. So that was an interesting aha moment, something that validated some of what we were taking in when we were kind of more traditionally researching back then, as far as trying to make connections, you know what I mean? And the fact that the names that we were given had the suffix of that term GAN in it, which matched up with the Apache belief systems, that kind of validated a little bit of what we were hearing and what we were seeing, you know? Mm-hmm. Short of it.
It's interesting. So I'm going to throw this out there. And I thought this was, there were legends and stories for a long time about this region. And I've done quite a bit of research, actually, just in the different creatures, not just Bigfoot, but that Apache Sitgreaves, whatever, that particular
National Forest.
They were cutting. That's where Travis Walton.
Oh, I know very well that. I was going to bring that up to you.
Yeah, he actually got abducted from that. I've actually corresponded with him. He didn't come on the show. He's got a story, and everybody's probably already heard it before, but he's an interesting guy. But it's crazy that he went missing, and then there were legends and stories of beings that would abduct people. And I don't think that they were just aliens, though. I think that there were people that were being abducted by these beings, but I think that that was also the Mugian monsters, right? All right. And then, as soon as Kramer leaves, I'm out of respect for Kramer. I'm not going to say it anymore. I'm going to start calling him again. Yeah.
The Mongoloid monster.
The Mongoloid monster.
That would be yours truly. Thank you.
I just keep going. The Mongoloid. It's a Mongoloid.
So, where Travis Walton was abducted is less than 20 miles as the crow flies north of like 3 of our primary research areas, like right there, and you spend enough time and you talk to anybody that's out in the woods doing this and out in the mountains doing this. You spend enough time out here doing this and you're going to start seeing a lot of other strange things in the sky and things over the mountains. We've had that happen. The first time I ever went out, I went out with Kevin Keeney when I moved to Arizona, and I knew Kevin online because, I've been around this a long time, but we were kind of online buddies and we linked up, and that's kind of how I kind of got into this group. And so he takes me out to the Mogollon Rim to a spot we call Hilltop 91. And literally the first 4 nights I was ever with these guys and out here, his first 2 nights was Kevin and I. Back then, we had we still did a lot of like this traditional, but everybody who does this is emulating somebody else at some point. That's just, oh, this person's had success or provoked the response doing this. So we would still gift back then, right? And this is when I was first getting started. So we had this one spot, we would probably about 1/8 of a mile from where we would camp, we used to call it a gift stump, right? And we would leave, they were smart the way they did it, but we would leave things out, like things that you would need opposable thumbs to actually get into. You know what I mean? Like they were pretty bright in how they were leaving items, right? So Kevin suggests, like, let's right at dusk, let's walk out and see if anything's been taken from the gift stump just to go check it out. So it gets dark while we're walking out. Kev's got a little infrared flashlight. And back then I didn't have a lot of the same gear that I think I was sleeping in the back. I brought my Saturn View up there and I just destroyed it in the first week. I mean, it was terrible. I was sleeping in the back. Anyway, so we're heading back. Nothing's taken from the gift stump. And so it's pitch black. There's no moon. And we're heading back to the campsite, and about 200 yards in front of us. And that, mind you, there is probably another human soul within a 30-mile radius of where we specifically are at this point, right? And the entire forest lights up like somebody had turned on a stadium switch. It wasn't where we were, but it was in front of us. Like I said, a couple hundred yards. I mean, it was like high noon all of a sudden. And we're looking up in the sky. There's no helicopter with lights. There's no moon. There's no discernible source for this at all, right? And I don't know if this is Sasquatch related, but I knew where we were, and I knew the Travis Walton story. Mm-hmm. And I remember I looked over at Kev.
Yeah.
Huh?
It's going to be in the back of your mind.
Oh yeah, totally. I looked over at Kev, and I'm like, oh, what is going on over there, right? And he's like, man, Kevin spent years up here. He goes, that's a new one for me. So we continue walking, and we get about another 50 yards up the trail, and all of a sudden, it's like somebody turned the lights off, and it just went pitch black again. Like, so that was like this lateral, odd phenomenon that has occurred while we were doing the Sasquatch thing that may or may not have been related, but it also may have tied into the Travis Walton stuff. There's a lot of strange things that have occurred up there. His is probably the most famous one, obviously. I mean, they made a major motion picture out of it. One of the guys from the AZ4, he lives in Snowflake, which is like, I don't know, 40 miles north of the Mogollon Rim, like up in it's an old Mormon town that still exists. I don't know if he's Mormon or not.
I know where it's in, and it's a little enclave there.
Yeah. Mormon Mafia.
That's actually a thing. I'm not.
I know it is.
People joke around, but they do. Like,
listen, if you're not plugged into that scene in some of these small old Mormon frontier towns, you're not going to get a job. Your kid's not going to play little league. Like they've got their own thing going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever.
I got a friend who's a Tongan, and he lives up in Utah, and they have their own thing, and he was one of the only people in his family who didn't want to be Mormon. He decided, and he was a rugby player. And so he told me, I named Sam. I said, Sam, what did you end up doing? He said, I moved away because I couldn't be not Mormon there. It just wasn't going to happen. I mean, they have their own,
oh yeah,
you fall in line, and that's pretty much it. I mean, it's, people thought it was funny, not to get off base here, but with the Amish mafia. But they didn't realize the Mennonites have their own little thing too. And if you go to these places and you don't know people, and you don't get to know people, I've been one of those people who could always talk to people and kind of figure out how things work really quick. And so people feel comfortable talking to me, and they'll tell you straight up, like, look, man, and it's like that with the reservations too, man, on the res.
Oh yeah.
They won't talk to you unless you get to know somebody, and then maybe they'll let you get in and whatever.
It has taken us, it even before me, a long time to make some inroads on the reses up here, because I mean, let's face it, still, although they don't own this topic, nobody does. But if you want a good source of long-term old school lore, there's no better place to start than on the res. You know what I mean? Especially, the Navajo res has just got some of the most, and I've been up there many, many, many times, has just got some of the most amazing stories. So, Jonathan Dover and those people that were part of the Navajo Rangers, like, I still get obsessed with watching Dark Winds, just waiting for that one episode where hopefully there's going to be a Bigfoot story.
Yeah. I'm telling you, the Skinwalker stuff to them, I mean, it could be the Nez Perce. It doesn't matter. The Navajo, if
Cree, all of them,
Cree, they all have some sort of shapeshifter, and they all have a Bigfoot.
They all do.
That right there tells me something is going on there. I mean,
what I've noticed, Wolf, is that there is no consensus about the inherent nature of Sasquatch amongst, let's say, the Navajos and the Hopis at all. They don't all agree. There's those that will say, stay away from them. They're no good. Don't seek them out. And there's others that believe just the opposite, that if you see one, that they bring good fortune, that they have a benign presence as opposed to maybe a malevolent presence. So, I always find that really interesting that amongst the Navajo themselves, there isn't, when it comes to Sasquatch, there is not a consensus about it, and that's, I think the Apaches lean more towards more of a benign presence. There are some Navajos that absolutely say, you don't want to mess with these guys, and others that say just the opposite. So I don't know. I think we're always trying to navigate our way through that. And that's the same, like the Cree are the same way. The Cree believe like the 8 spiritual animals of their core belief system, the wolf, the eagle, the fox, and the 8th one is Sasquatch. You know what I mean? So that's interesting to me that they don't look at it as being like some mythical being. They look at it as being something just as real as they are, It's cool.
Yeah, the Kiowa had the same sort of, they had the 3 totem. And then there was this 4th one. This is a weird thing. Like, they had the wolf, they had the raven, and they had this other, which was like there was no depiction of it. They didn't have a totem. They didn't have anything for it. It was just like there, and it was like considered to be kind of like a dark spirit. And the name that they used for it translates to like dark cloud, which was weird. But then people would talk about it being able to take the form. Like, they didn't say it takes the form of a man, but it could move around like a man, like it was trying to imitate a man. But that always made me think, what if that is, but it wasn't the Skinwalker, because they had something for that. They had something that could turn into a fox, a wolf, or a coyote, or a deer, and you had to make like a whistling noise. And some of these tribes have this. Now, I had a friend who's Mescalera, and he was talking about deer not always being deer. That was way back before people started talking about not deer.
Right.
And now you're talking about not deer, and they were just like, you don't know what you're shooting at. So they would kind of do the same thing. They make this noise and see if the deer would imitate it, just not thinking, like,
right.
Whoa.
Right. Just to try and trick them into exposing what they might or might not be.
Yeah. And there was this weird. So I was talking on the show last night about how sometimes when people, or not, it was on Random Files, not last night's show, it was a Random Files the night before. And we were talking about how demons like attach themselves to serial killers and politicians. It's kind of the connection there. Almost the same thing. But anyway, I was talking about how sometimes when you encounter somebody who's demonic, you can ask them their name. They may slip up and tell you if they have this on them. They'll tell you the truth. And so that's the whole precedence behind that. Like, okay.
Isn't it amazing the power the name has, like, throughout all these lateral phenomenon, the occult stuff, the demonology stuff? We've always wondered, like, if we've been given names to refer to the forest people as, like, if that's what their names are, I know that you don't believe, and let me preface this. I don't believe that. So there are guys in the Arizona Board that think that every negative encounter or every scary story around Sasquatch is just merely a matter of perception. That you don't know that they don't believe that they're all fundamentally not good. And I don't believe that because I've been around long enough and I've heard enough for every one uplifting, good, spiritual, beautiful encounter. Like mainly what I've experienced, there's 50 that aren't that. There's you hear about the cannibal stories in North Texas. There's just a legion of horrifying Sasquatch encounters out there. So I don't know why. I believe they're like a people. I do. I think that there are well-intended ones. I think there are ones somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, and I think there are ones that if they could harm you, that they would. And so I think that we've just been really blessed and lucky that our encounters have not been with the bad kind. But I do believe the bad ones are out there.
Two things to add to that. One is in the Levant, the Arabs, and this predates Islam. A lot of people just connect it to Islam because it's spoken of in the Quran. But before the Quran, the Arabs, the Phoenicians, the Chaldeans, they all had their own beliefs, and that involved the jinn. And they are 100% across the board. Nearly every nation in the Levant does believe that there are benevolent, and then there's ambivalent, and then there's negative. And
right.
Yeah. And so they run the gamut, and they don't have to be bad. But there is another thing I was going to say. Now, there are creatures that are not necessarily evil, but until they are. And so I kind of look at it like that. I don't think that they're all bad or they're all good. I think most of the ones that will interact with you are probably not going to be good, because if they don't want anything from you, they're just going to try to be away from you. They don't really want anything to do with you.
We've had different energy with that, like we have. So one of the other bones of contention is that some of the guys believe that there's a hive mind consciousness with these guys. You know what I mean? That what one knows, they all know. I don't believe that. I think that they have ways to move about and vet you if they want to. They can find things out pretty quick, but I don't think they're all drawing from some hive consciousness. I have just never believed that. And we've had experiences that would kind of back that up, or we've been to a new location and, we find structure and there's activity there. But the energy's off. You know what I mean? Like they may know that we know that they know, but they have absolutely no desire to interact with us like that. You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter how one of us shamelessly drops names or whatever we're trying to do to maybe provoke a response. We know there's stuff going on there, but it's not going to happen with us. So that kind of, like, if there was a hive mind consciousness, I would think that these guys would know, well, these guys have had relationships with these guys for 10 years. You know what I mean? Maybe they're whatever, you know what I mean? So I just never believed that. I've never felt like that was a thing, for whatever reason.
And I've talked about this on the True Crime Paranormal show that we got now. And we were covering the Gypsy Rose case, which was sort of the first episode of True Crime Paranormal, but we did it on PRT. And then that jump-started what became True Crime Paranormal. So it was a 3-parter, if anybody is interested. And we did the middle part. The first part was on Blondes and Booze, and we did it, and then BMR did it. But Gypsy Rose, one of the demons was the 72 Goetic demons, and they're really fallen angels. They're archons, what they are. And Visago was the one that came up over and over again in that case, and it's a vampiric demon. And what this has to do with it is Visago, when you read about this guy, it's interesting. He has 26 or 27 legions that he's a powerful dude. But it says that he has a good nature. Like in the description of him, when you read about him in the Ars Goetia, right? When you read about this in the Lesser Key of Solomon, it says that he's of a good nature. But this is a fallen angel. So people are like, well, how is that? How does that work? Like, how is it that he's of a good nature? I look at it like this. Anything and anybody can be decent, but sometimes you're playing on a team and you're not a good, it's just not a good team. And like that's kind of what it is. That's what I think, that sometimes there can be 9 bad ones. There's always one good one that's just kind of like, I'm just doing this because it's a means to an end.
Right.
So, I mean, that's what I think
It's a
he is.
job.
I think he kind of, it's a job. So he kind of fell in line. Lucifer was talking in the town square. Let's go, And he's like, he does make some valid points. Maybe I should join this. And then after he does it, he's like, oh crap, now I'm stuck,
For
but
all
now
eternity.
and now you got to follow the boss, and pretty much. But the thing is, like, people get confused because demons don't answer to the rebellious. So there's two different things there.
Right.
It's actually 3 or 4, but then they get confused because they're like, well, they're all together. No, the Goetic are all together, and then the 200 Watchers fallen are all together, and then their descendants are all over the place. But demons, that just not to get confused, demons are not necessarily that, but Bigfoot is considered to be one of what we would call the Aliyud, and people don't understand what that is. That is the descendants of the Nephilim. And
I don't go in for that anymore. I don't.
What about this? Before, because I know your stance on it, but what about this? Because supposedly Tiamat created them along with the Scorpion Man, the Bull Man, which is a Minotaur, and he or she, it was supposed to be a she, created them. But then it gets weirder because then Tiamat is also a planet, right? Like
it was destroyed.
Yeah, exactly. So the planet Tiamat created them, and what if that is what they are? But like a lot of these things, like you'll have like different types of creations that'll have.
It smells like Sitchin.
Well, maybe a little.
It is.
If you go back to the not just Tiamat, but if you take Tiamat out of it and you just go back to like the hairy man being part of the Aliyud, that's biblical. So then you got what could be 2 different sets of these creatures, and why they look so different. Because I get reports, I'm telling you, here in Texas, of a hyper aggressive nature. And then you get these ones when you get further up near Tyler, Texas, not Taylor, where I'm from, but Tyler. And Anthony, we've been over this. We interviewed somebody not too long ago from Palestine, Texas, and they were talking about the ones there, not nearly as aggressive. About Lake Livingston, they were like,
is that like Northeast?
Yeah, the Northeast. But then when you're further down over here, these bastards are mean as hell. I mean, I wouldn't want to be caught out there with them, and they're smaller, but they're mean as hell. And then you get the skunk ape that's got its own personality, kills things. The Mugion Rim, you got this creature. I get reports there too that it's benevolent, that not all of them are evil, and they're more kind of like giant people. I mean,
that's how we look at them. That's been our experience. That when we've been blessed enough to like have some interaction, have some physical sighting, have some communication. Our take has always been that that they're benevolent by nature. Like that has been who we've experienced with. But also that like if you try and like get a straight answer, when the telepathy stuff started happening, and then we would ask questions, you know what I mean? And we would never get every answer that if we've even been responded to, were very cryptic answers, like, what are you? What are you? And then we'd get back, you're asking the wrong question, or like, what are you? As in, what are you people? Like, you don't even know who you are to ask us that question. Or they would say, we are you, whatever. But they would never flesh it out. You know what I mean? Like, there's never been one yes or no. There's never been and then you got to wonder too, like, so that type of dialogue, when that started happening amongst us, we would vet it. We would write down what we heard, and then afterwards we would share it. And like between 4 of us, or 5 of us back then, it would be identical what we would write down. And then we would do like a 5 count after we heard something. And this wasn't audible. This was something that was, in your head. And then we would, what did you just hear? And we would give a 5 count, and we would repeat it identically. So when we started to be able to say, okay, I'm not nuts, like this is actually happening, that changed a few things, because I think that all of us have enough of a Christian background, right? That like you think you have some degree of spiritual protection and discernment, but we're dealing with things that, maybe we shouldn't be sticking our finger in that soup too often, because I don't think any of us knows with a surety. And this goes for anybody in this field that's had the level of interaction that, say, the Arizona 4 has. And there's folks up in the Pacific, all over the country that I know, and I don't think any of us know with a surety. Arla, Williams and back east, has these incredible, and she's believable and she's, authentic. But I still run from anyone that speaks with a surety about origin foundational stories and what these things are, because I don't think we know. I don't necessarily get in line with the biblical creationists anymore. And I don't. I used to. But that hasn't been my experience, and I think this is what we do here is we just kind of flesh out these theories, because every single bit of this, Josh, and it, I don't care, whoever speaks with the definitives and a surety, they have no right to, because all of it is conjecture. Every bit of it. We can talk, the greatest value in research is no longer to me like, oh, I casted these prints, or we put the cameras down years ago. They're useless. It's a pointless endeavor. The true research is in narrative comparatives. It's in literally what you do. Like, okay, so we look for commonalities, right? Like this guy up in British Columbia had this happen, and he listened to a story, and then you try and imprint things that you've experienced and look for those common things where maybe that moves the ball forward a little bit. But again, at the end of the day, it's all educated guessing and looking into these backstories. Like you and I both took a deep enough dive in the Anunnaki stuff. Obviously, I used to think that Scott Carpenter, rest in peace, was at the forefront of determining what these things are. There was a time where I fully believed in the Nephilim narrative. It just made sense. It made sense. If these things were descended from some fallen angelic being and a human, it would make sense that they would be absolutely have some abilities that we don't have, all that stuff. You know what I mean? But if their nature was inherently wrong, why would they have ever done anything like this for me? Why would they have ever done some of the more special kind things? Why would anything that was descended from a Nephilim that had an inherent evil nature ever show compassion, kindness, or generate love for a human being? You would think they would do the opposite. Just my guess,
Not
anyway.
Necessarily.
No, they're into the rant, and I've been known to be wrong a few times.
So here's what Wendy Eater says. Wolf, I got here late. Did Chris say which of the Arizona 4 got healing from the Sasquatch? You want to answer that?
That was me.
I can tell you, Wendy was the bad guy. It was the bad.
It was the worst one of all of us. The one that deserved it the least.
Yeah, exactly.
It was he who shan't be named.
So that answers that. It was actually Chris. What's crazy though, okay, so you got healing from this, but there are people who have told me that they've been abducted. One lady from North Carolina, 100%. I mean, was just ranting. And I'm not going to try to say that. I'm not saying anything negative or whatever, but I couldn't even get a story because I said one thing she didn't agree with, and it was like, so we agreed to disagree.
People like that.
Yeah, I'm not going to retell her story. She asked me not to. I said, well, okay, fine, good, whatever.
Thanks,
she was very adamant that she got cured from cancer from the beings that were abducting her. And I don't think these were aliens. I think they were fae. But she said that they healed her. And so she's very on board with that and says, I will never speak ill of them. And I said, they were taking you and doing things to you since you were a young teenager. I don't think.
Yeah, the abduction stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. But they did.
I mean, I don't discount anybody's. I mean, you do this partially for a living. Like we can't discount people out of the gate, right? Like, and I don't ever want to be dismissive of any, I mean, you can't be around the Sasquatch phenomenon and not see parallels with ufology and some of the other fringe topics that are kind of drifting more into the mainstream in the last 10 years than they've ever been, partially because of platforms like this. So when I hear those things, I mean, there's great Sasquatch abduction stories. Like there's that real famous one at the 1900s up that guy in Alaska or wherever that they got thrown over the shoulder and brought to a cave. Supposedly, I can't think of the dude's name, but it's kind of famous. And a lot of other ones. I've never heard one other than the Travis Walton thing where we're at. But other than that, that apparently wasn't a Sasquatch related story. But who knows? Like there's so much crossover these days with all of it. That's the beauty of literally paranormal freaking roundtable, dude. You know what I mean? Where we kind of open up all these boxes in the same room and we air it out and see what it looks like, man. What I love, so I'm here.
Well, what are your thoughts on like this? Okay, let's just take your encounter and put it aside because it was obviously you had something benevolent that happened to you. And maybe that being is not as evil or mean or bad as some of these others, but there's so many different kinds too. And I'm not going to take that, off the table that they are tricky, But if you were to say, like you yourself, would you go to an area where let's say you haven't been, like you haven't interacted? This is a whole nother, like Olympic Forest, right? Would you go up to the Olympic Forest in Washington and on somebody's word and maybe try to communicate with those Sasquatch?
I would do it. I would.
And you would feel completely safe?
I would be wary. I would be as armed spiritually as I can. And I would go in there. Josh, here's something that I do believe. And I don't know this to be true, but this is played out in my experience. And that's what I brought into these areas with me is what's been reflected back at me. I've never felt like if I'm going up there and I'm looking for the malicious, mysterious Sasquatch monster, that may be what gets reflected back at me, if anything does. I think we've learned through trial and error and a lot of error that like to try and present the most authentic version of myself when I'm at these places has always been a good way to advance, to try and find some humility and project that. It almost like sounds like an antithesis, like I'm trying to project humility, but I mean like seriously, to try and be okay, I am a flawed, I've sinned, but I'm here to learn, I'm here to learn from you. I'm here to experience if there's anything to experience in the positive ways. And that's been what's been reflected back at myself and the rest of the guys from the Arizona 4. So I would take that as like, yeah, I would go anywhere with that belief system. And I have. I mean, I've been all over the country doing this, and up the Pacific Northwest, down south, obviously back east. But that's been my experience. I've never, even in Rhode Island, like I never had anything negative ever happen. Not one time. You know what I mean? And this is back when I didn't, when I'm just parroting other people 20 years ago and just, oh, this guy did this, let me try this, all those things. But I think I've just been either been really lucky or that's been the truth. And the more I've realized that, like, okay, as long as I'm in here being authentic, and I can be authentic and still flawed, you know what I mean? Like, that's okay. Nobody's looking for perfection. You know what I mean? So that, I really do think what you bring in there is oftentimes what gets reflected back. I think that's held up for me. So yeah, I would go to those places. I would.
Have you? So the Mogollon area, right? I'm trying to practice that.
The Mongoloid Rim.
I've been saying it wrong for years.
Love it.
Let's say that you go there and so you've been there many times. How many experiences have you personally had there? Just you?
Oh my goodness, John. I mean, this is going to sound arrogant, and it's not, but I've had so many different levels of experience that I don't even know if I could put a number on it. It doesn't happen every time we go somewhere. Sometimes it's just four morons sitting on a stump, you know what I mean? And nothing's going on and we're just cracking jokes and whatever. But, from the physical manifestation of this twinkle light effect to, seeing cloaked beings all around me, to having had the mind speak occur with a degree of frequency, hundreds of some more, obviously the healing of my hand, which is like the highlight of my Sasquatch career and my life, quite frankly. It was the greatest lesson and gift I've ever been given. You know what I mean? And so I've had a great deal of them. We all have. You know, we've all had really personal, unique encounters. You know, when my dad died 2 years ago, that was a really special one. Did I tell you that story ever?
I don't know. I think, yeah, probably. But I mean, you can reiterate it if you have, you know.
So in May of 24, I'm driving along the 260 below the rim. And I'm just, me and Kevin Keeney are going to meet up for like a 3 or 4 nighter up on the rim. Just go up, see what happens. Just him and I. And right before I lose signal, I get a phone call, and it's my younger brother in back east who informs me that our dad had just passed, right? And my dad was ill and whatever. And so I, pull over the side of the road. I call my family, let the kids know, hey, grandfather just died. We're going to have to head back east. And, so I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, well, now what am I supposed to do? Like, what do I do right now? And I decide, like, I can't think of a better way to like process the death of my dad than out in nature with my best friend and, somebody who I can be vulnerable with. And maybe, if I got a breakdown or whatever. My dad and I had a complicated relationship, but we loved each other. I love my dad. So I just decide to continue on. So I cut up onto the rim, up in elevation, and I'm driving along Rim Road, and then I bang a right back to the trails, and I'm heading about 6 miles away from where we're meeting at this one campsite. And I get to the crossroad of these 2 trails. This story's whack. And I come to a stop in my Tacoma, and I get this deep rumbling female voice in my head that said, "We mourn with you the loss of your father, and we celebrate that he is at peace with the Creator now." It's the longest sentence I've ever received like that. And it floored me because it was unexpected, and this had just happened, you know what I mean, within the last half an hour. And so I start to, kind of lose my composure a little bit. I mean, it was heavy, and I was heavy anyway with grief. And I kind of pull it together, and I start driving down the trail a little bit more, and I see Kev hiking up the trail. So he jumps in the car. He knew my dad a little bit, and tell him what just happened. And that night, so we're at this place we call Coyote Camp, and it was one of the maybe top 2 or 3 like experiential nights I've ever had. Like, they were all around us. We had a visible sighting right at dusk of this like almost white one 50 yards away from us, and he was there, and then he wasn't there, but we both saw him. And then that night, the female that had spoke to me showed up in front of, she walked out of the forest in front of Kevin and me. This sounds, when I say some of these things, they come out of my mouth, dude. Like, I literally, if I look at it from 30,000 feet, I think, dude, you sound like you belong in a rubber room. However, this is what happened. Yeah. So she was in this kind of cloak state. It was a new moon. You could see her clearly. And she came and stood about 5 feet in front of Kevin and myself. She reiterated what she said to me again. Kev heard it as well. She flashed her eyes at both of us. She turned around and she walked back into the woods. And I felt like that entire night was like almost like this celebration of life for my father. That may not have been what was going on, but that was how I, at the time, discerned it and how I took it. It was so powerful, and it was a beautiful thing, Like I said, like I've been so blessed that I've had those type of interactions, and that was a profound one for me, and it made the passing of my father and a little bit more special to me as a result, So anyway, that's that story.
Talking about all this, and of course, I know you probably heard it happened here in Austin at the film festival about the Bigfoot. They're saying now that it was a hoax.
Oh, the Patterson-Gimlin thing?
Patterson-Gimlin thing.
That happens every 5 years.
Yeah. Here's the thing for me, though. I never believed in the film in the first place.
I know you didn't.
Yeah, I don't. I've always said that. I've stuck by my guns. At first, I was kind of like, I don't know what I believe. But once I looked at it enough, and I just said, I don't believe that that's what that is. And the reason I don't believe is because I don't think you can video these things. I don't. If they want to be seen, they'll be seen. And if
Agreed.
not, and they don't want to be seen, they won't do it. And that's
one of the reasons why we put the camera down. You can video them. You know what I mean? Like that can happen. You know, I've got hard drives full of, you know, back in the day, you know, when I'm time stamping video that I didn't see live with the eye, and then I start seeing stuff, all the with the little red circles, all that goofy crap. You know what I mean? Like everybody that's ever done this on any level has gone down that road for a while. You know what I mean? Where you realize, okay, it's not all pareidolia if it's got like nose hairs and teeth. You know what I mean? Okay, so that's something else, but it serves no purpose. The Patterson-Gimlin thing to me is an anomaly. Like you just said, it is. I don't know. Maybe the Freeman footage, which is also very compelling, might be the closest thing that's ever besides the Patterson-Gimlin footage. I've spent too much time in the presence of MK Davis to be dismissive anymore. You know, I got to spend some time with him last year in July up in Oak Ridge with Brett and Jill, and I followed Green Wave for a long time, and I always felt like he was authentic and cool, and he believed in what he was doing. You know, Bob Gimlin hasn't changed his story in 60 years. You know what I mean?
Here's what I think about that, and I'm going to say this, and what better person to have than a friend that's been through all what you've been through. I look at it like this. I believe in these creatures 110%. Like there is, like I don't have a doubt in my mind. Like I don't at this point. There's no. I've talked to too many people. I've sat across from people at restaurants that have just and at conferences, and they've told me, "Look, this is what I've seen." I've talked to so many people through Skype, talking like we are here. I know they're 110% real, but I don't know that. I just don't think that film is real, but I don't think that it really matters to me personally. And I'm going to be a little long-winded here. I don't think that film matters, you know, that whether or not it's, you got some sound going on there. I don't know.
Some kind of background
feedback
noise
or something.
You know,
we'll try to figure that out.
Is this that was just the buzzing in my head?
Is that coming from you, Chris?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't hear it.
Okay, try muting your mic and then let's see.
No, I don't think it's coming from him.
No, it's not Chris. It's us.
What is it?
I don't know.
I mean, most of what I'm saying probably just sounds like buzzing in people's ears anyway. But I'm not taking credit for that one.
No, but here's what I got to say, and I it doesn't change. Like Ken Gerhard, good friend of mine, he posted this thing about it. It doesn't change for me, like what I think it is. Like it's not going to matter to me if it comes out that it's a fake or it's not a fake. It doesn't change anything for me.
For so many people, it's the crown jewel of visual evidence. And so the question is like, how important is that anymore? You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's not. Like, I'm like you. I don't need evidence anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't feel the desire that I need to provide it for anybody else anymore either. Like that was always part of the mission, right? That's what a researcher's doing. That's what the research is, right? You're trying to amass enough data to provide others that may not believe what's going on. Like, why else would you be doing it? You know what I mean? Really.
And you're talking about Brett and Jill. You're talking about Jill Schneider and Brett Eichenberger.
Yeah.
And they did a Flash of Beauty. Yeah, I'm going to be doing a show with them pretty soon.
They're great.
And Jill's been on the show before. Maybe
she's awesome.
I don't know. Good people, nice people. MK Davis, obviously, but you know, I know pretty much everybody in this field, and I probably interviewed half of them, if not, you know, most of them. But here's the thing. There you go. You got it. You fixed it. I knew you could. But here's the thing. We say thank you to Anthony there. There you go.
There he is. What's up,
man? He got it done. So, but here's the thing. I've talked to all these different people, and everybody's got their own view about it. And one of the things I said to Ken, you know, and me and him, we're good friends. We talk all the time. But I told him, I said,
he's cool.
It doesn't matter to me whether it's real or it doesn't change anything for me. I've always said that I didn't think that footage was real. But here's the other thing about Bob. I'm going to defend Bob Gimlin here. Now, I don't know Bob, but I know a bunch of people who know him and who spoke very highly of him. I personally believe that if it was a fraud, okay, which I think it probably was, I think it was Roger. I mean, I really do. I think that he was kind of a showman. Now, here's
he was
my
an
take.
opportunist, is
He was an opportunist.
what Roger
I don't
Patterson
think
was.
he was
Absolutely.
I think what it was though, I think he really did believe in Bigfoot because I think that he was so desperate to prove to people that it was real that this is what I personally believe. I think he went down that route, but I think he tricked Bob. I do. I think that's maybe part what have happened. Like I think
That's
he told him to
possible,
stay
man.
there, and Roger went and did what he did and got the guy Harmonious or what's his name? Harmonious, whatever Heronius, whatever to
Have
go
you
in.
ever sat down and talked with MK?
No. No, I've never sat down and spoke to him. No.
You should. He would come on only because you're always open to perspective, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe aside from Bobby Short, I don't know anybody that's had their hands on the originals that's done a deeper dive into the whole mythos surrounding that footage. And it's not my job to say his opinion, but he is compelling. Just like many of us can be very compelling in all fairness. You know what I mean? Like, if you believe in what you're saying and you're authentic as much as you can be, your perception could be off, but you could be also very compelling. MK is compelling. His work is compelling, So I've always believed it was real. I don't know that the stories behind it ever made sense. MK talks about them staking out a juvenile, and that's what lured her out into there's all kinds of fantastic backstory to that whole footage. If you take a deep enough dive, he's a great one to talk to. He really is. But I think you're right, Josh. At this stage of the game, it just doesn't matter. It does not matter. But the people who I respect, Barb Shoop, some of these great, well-respected people that I know that are authentic, coming screaming to that defense of that thing, it's still important to people. And that's the truth. This is gonna flare up for a couple months. This happens every 5 years, something like this goes on. You know what I mean? And then it'll die out because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Let me show you something here. This is interesting. Now, I'm going to say this. This was on, I think it's called Occult Realms or something. I don't know. It's something that pops up in my feed. I don't belong to that group. But it's just, they're always talking about Dogman. They always have these weird names or whatever. And this is probably, I don't know. I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's AI or if it's not AI, and I don't care. But this is weird. Because when I saw this, and I sent this to my friend, I said, doesn't this look like what we saw? But look at this guy right here. Like if you back it up, it's a little bright on the face.
What's going on there?
I can't get. You can't see the face on there.
But I'm getting the gist of it. Where was that at?
I can't get a good. Well, how do we dim the light down a little bit to make it not so? See if we can get you. There we go. Look at that. Look at this thing.
Where was that?
I don't know the reference of it because when I took the clip of it, I clipped it off of their page, and I was in the middle of a freaking hurry, and now I regret because I can't remember the name of the damn
where the source was.
Yeah, and I mean it's probably AI or whatever,
right? AI killed video evidence anyway. It's killed it,
right? But the thing is, what's interesting to me though is that actually looks a lot like what I saw. Now, Ken Gerhard had made that point on his Facebook. He says, I don't know if you read the big thing he wrote up about it, but
I've been seeing this been crossing my feed, multiple takes on this thing for days now.
People saying it. I saw Matt Moneymaker getting all crazy about it because that's his bread and butter. So that's
whatever.
Yeah, I don't care what he says, but I don't. I could give a shit about that. I mean, the guy out there, he was a homeless guy. He's out here shitting. I care much about what he just made than is what he says. And I don't care. Somebody's going to go tell him, and I don't really care. But the bottom line is this. Ken Gerhard was saying that basically there was this big old long thing about it. And he's saying he's going to reserve his judgment on whatever. But he said that a lot of people claim that that's what a Bigfoot looks like. But here's my thing about that, okay? There are a ton of different types of reports. If people would go out and yes, I get slammed because I go into groups and I supposedly stalk people and and tell them, hey, give me your story because
you got time for that.
Yeah. But I've only gone to 75 different people's houses. That's it. I have not gone beyond the dude. But I got to get the story.
After the restraining order.
Yeah, I got to go there. There's only 18 restraining orders at this point. So, but I
You're whittling it down, man.
And I show up in their bushes. Hey, you gonna give me? I was aggressive in the beginning. I had to be. I had to get, and then it just kind of flows. Now I can just sit back and get them.
You let it come to you, man.
Yeah, you got to let it come to you. But sometimes you got to be a little proactive, right? So I try to be like, swoop down and get what I can get. And so I've been in a lot of these Bigfoot groups. I'm probably like in 100 of them, but I go in there and I was talking to some people and, and they were like, well, this one guy says he's seen 3 different types of Bigfoot just in California, in Northern California. Well, before somebody poo-poos that and says, well, I don't believe that, blah, 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 blah. Do you realize that if you were just in Northern California, you could run into like 6, 7 different types of people?
Right.
I mean, why is that so out of the realm of possibility that these beings are they look a lot alike, but they're not the same?
No, I agree. It's almost like there's different like ethnic types amongst the genre. Yeah. Really, I believe that. I've seen physically, like the first one I ever saw when I was in my early 20s and the Wisconsin Dells many, 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 many moons ago, had a more of a classic patty look, for lack of a better term. But I have seen them that don't look like that, and smaller, and obviously the different hair colors and different sizes. And I think there's some truth to that. I think there's probably multiple types. Carpenter used to believe that there was a lot of inbreeding that went on amongst what he was dealing with in the Smokies. You know what I mean? And that was how he would that's why when some of his visual evidence was very compelling, and they didn't all look like Patty. You know what I mean? Some of them kind of did, some of them didn't. Some of them looked really bizarre. I think you're right. I think there's a lot of different stuff out there. All of it related somehow.
These ones that they would talk about that were coming up out of in Kentucky. They were coming up out of these caves, and the same thing in Missouri, because those 2 states have like all these caves. And you'll get these reports of them having really big eyes. Like it's weird, like they're cave dwellers. And then the dog man. Now, I went after that like hardcore because, I personally, I had my dog man experience. But when I started interviewing people, I started noticing. Now, I got to say, the ones around my hometown where we were having and the counties around, they're pretty much the same, which makes me think that it could even be the same creature.
I'm going in for some ginger ale. I'm listening.
So when Ken Gerhardt and me interviewed all these people, I recruited him and a couple other people to talk to these different witnesses, because I had 2 books going at the same time. And Ken noticed that too. Like there was a lot of the ones in certain areas had the same look. And then because he's a Bigfoot researcher, and so he started noticing that with the dog man. So me and Ken were talking, and I told him, I said, you go to different areas and the dog man looked different, just like the Bigfoot looked different. But these dog men, some of these creatures, I don't know what you would really call them. I mean, they're not. So Anthony, the ones that we were getting reports of down in Brenham, when we were going to the Texans game, I was taking you guys to the Texans game, the lady we talked to right there at the Weichels Bakery off of 290. When she started talking about what she saw, interesting that the appearance of what she saw looks similar to the ones that were the reports that we had gotten, other reports out of that area. Yes or no? I mean, what do you?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
because like the way you described it, she lit up immediately. She's like, "Oh my God, I saw that."
Yeah, because what's her name had seen Brenda.
Yeah.
Because Brenda had seen the same thing. Her and the husband at the time, Luke, had seen this dog man that looked like what she saw.
Yeah.
And it was, I know where it was at. And when she started talking about the church and all that, everybody was like, oh yeah. And there was a guy in the background who was standing there paying for his stuff. And he started talking about his nephew. He's like, well, yeah, he says nephew's friend. One of my nephew's friends saw something similar to that, blah, blah, blah. So this could be something that is regional. But then there is a legend. I interviewed a person who used to work at one of the fast food places there. got in touch with this person through one of the people I interviewed about the church sighting. And she says, well, this guy goes to my church. He used to be the manager of this. I don't think he still works there. And he was like, yeah, he goes, and he said that his niece used to work at the Bluebell is the ice cream place there. Used to work at the Bluebell factory. She was leaving. She sees the Bigfoot.
I remember that ice cream.
Yeah, it's still around. I mean, it's
yeah.
They make a big
once in a
deal
while
out of it. But she saw this Bigfoot type creature, right? Well, after I interviewed her, which was just last week, I talked to her, and I said, her name is Dorothy. I said, Dorothy, what did you see? She starts describing a snout and the same ridge on the back, and I said, oh my gosh, that is this wolf-like creature. She's like, yeah, kind of like that. She's like, but I just thought maybe that's what a Bigfoot looks like. I said, that's not what a Bigfoot looks like. Not technically, but it's all a matter of perspective. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it, bubblish fisheye. Like I said, don't matter. It's just, but some people will call that a dog man. But then my friends, from the Utes, they were like, when I was talking about Dogman, they were kind of looking at me like, what is that? And Johnny was like, nah, this is a skinwalker, or what you would call a skinwalker, like
right.
A shapeshifter. And so, I was like, don't try to put that on me. That's what I would call it. What do you mean, you people? No, I'm joking. But he was like, what you people would call that. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
When you need them.
Half white, half Hispanic people? Quarter Native people? No, but it does. There's a weird type of creature, whatever. But there are some of these creatures, depending on the area, and they are aggressive as hell. I mean, they really are. You get stories out of Michigan and the Manatee National Forest. Dude, people get attacked there. They do.
Michigan, to me, is the ground zero for Dogman. I think in my head, that's where I first started hearing about those stories was Dogman up in the Upper Peninsula. You know what I mean? Before, the LBL, before all that. But long before that, that was where I would hear those stories, And I've never encountered one, I don't think, but who knows?
Rob had Dennis Carroll on earlier. If you guys want to go and take a listen to that later, that Bigfoot Michigan Rob, he had Dennis Carroll. I wish I could have watched it, but I was running late, Rob. Sorry about that. I usually do the what's it called? The Patreon on here. We don't take many of the listeners away, but I ended up screwing up, and I had told, that, we got to whatever. So we ended up, here we are. So, but yeah, it's an interesting thing when you interview these people and when you're in a certain area. And this is something that me and Ken actually talked about during the book, before we were doing the work for the book, before we got before we went to the conference, and we were trying to get it done and close it out and get it done or whatever. And he says, man, this is interesting. We were talking all the time, we had to communicate, and he said, man, this is interesting. He goes, I'm learning a lot about this creature. And he's like, and I don't think this is what Ken said. And he's a flesh and blood Bigfoot guy. But he goes, I don't think this is all flesh and blood, And
amazing how those guys are all coming off of that in the last couple of years.
Yeah, they're kind of having to come around and say, hey, man, maybe this isn't all flesh and blood. Now, I don't think he's off the Bigfoot flesh and blood train yet. But the last time we ate dinner together in San Antonio, before he moved up to the upstate New York with him and Ann, and him and his wife were good friends with me and Nellie, and we've spent a lot of time with them. And we were there eating dinner, and we were just shooting the breeze, and it came back around to, because we were actually in a haunted place, and we're talking about ghosts, right? And so Ken's had a couple ghost experiences. I'm not gonna say anything. He had something weird happen to him in Georgia, and then he had a UFO experience when he was filming. I'm gonna rat him out. Go ahead. When he was filming Alaska. What's it called? Missing in Alaska. He had something really weird happen to him up there. So he's had some other experiences, but he's still one of those people, like my friend Lyle and a few others. They're still hanging on to that. This thing has to be a flesh and blood creature.
Buddy, these guys have put so much effort and time that they're going to have to die on that hill. You know what I mean? Like, that's the truth. And I don't disparage them. I don't. I mean, when you see Money Faker talking about orbs these days, you know what I mean? Like, that to me is like, the ultimate, I've lost all relevance, because the narrative has shifted dramatically, and really in the last 7 or 8 years, from that camp into there's something else going on here besides just flesh and blood. And they all know it. They all know it. They all do, you know, but if you've got 25 years hanging on to that narrative and trying to prove it and, using Dr. Meldrum as like, some sort of like all knowing,
guru
piece to your puzzle, I can't help you, man. Like I there's obviously a flesh and blood element to it, but there's something else. And anybody that really, really can too has been around and seen some of the different phenomenon that goes with this. It's undeniable to me. You know what I mean? It just is. I've never been an aper. My nature, my experiences have never been of that. Just, then it screamed at me and stomped off in the woods, and I followed its track. That has not been our experience at all.
Yeah.
They're all coming off of it.
I know that when I talked to him, we were sitting there in that restaurant in San Antonio, and he says it's something that we can't comprehend, and that's as close as we've been able to get. Yeah, to me and him agreeing on that. And like I said, he's a very good friend of mine. And when we were driving back from the first conference, we had gotten back to Fort Worth, and so we were exhausted. We were coming back from Tennessee, so I rode with him back into Austin, and then he made the trek back to San Antonio. Guy's a trooper. He can really, and
it's
so
a lot of driving,
man. But we did it, in the first conference, and then we did the second conference, and I think the more time that we work together, the more that I can understand his perspective. But I told him this, and I'll tell anybody this, and I'll say this publicly to any of my friends that are apers, or if they're not, it doesn't matter. You don't see anybody going from our camp to become flesh and blooders. It just doesn't happen. It does not happen.
Nobody who ever started out as a paranormalist, Bigfoot, or ever said, you know what? That's completely off base. They gotta be flesh and blood like that. That's a one-way street, dude. That's a great.
You don't go from being like what we are to there, because when I was younger, I was kind of.
I'm gonna kill the camera for a second. I gotta blow my nose.
That's fine.
I
was teeter-tottering on whether or not the Dogman was a flesh and blood, or maybe it was a paranormal, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. But I thought, no way, this is a flesh and blood 100%, because there's too many people who've had these weird experiences with the dreams and all the weird stuff that happens. I just don't.
Kevin gets that a lot.
Yeah. You want to take over for a minute? I gotta get this call.
What's up, man?
Yeah, like building on that point, there's definitely like a natural intellectual progression that you see take place with people, where like there's really only like one way forward, and that's coming from, this is a like an undiscovered species of bipedal hominid to wait a minute, there's some kind of, if not spiritual, then at least interdimensional nature.
And those two things might be interchangeable, Ant, spiritual, interdimensional. Like at this point, it's vagaries that we're talking about, stuff that isn't necessarily defined by traditional academia, maybe quantum physics on some level. Moorhead might have been onto something with quantum Bigfoot. I mean, that kind of stuff. You're always looking to make sense, always looking for it to make sense. And I don't know that it ever always will make sense. I don't think we're supposed to know.
I mean, it never really will to what we call mainstream academia, which is why I think like a lot of people kind of really put a lot of stock into Jeff Meldrum's research. But the thing is, like, that approach kind of implies like, well, if we frame it in this kind of this nice mainstream scientific box, then it will be accepted by the masses, by mainstream academia. But the fact is,
obviously,
it's never going to happen. Like
it was the only narrative for a long time that was even like allowed to be exposed to the public. You know what I mean? On Finding Bigfoot and some of these other shows, or you're talking about. They're trying, back in the day, they were always trying to tie in a piece of a jawbone that was found in China, where they've created this hominid known as Gigantopithecus that somehow magically appeared in North America, but there's no evidence of that. Like, there's no evidence of a North American ape ever. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah,
like, that's such a stretch, and there's really not much to build on it, though. It doesn't make sense. Talk to the natives. You know what I mean? Like, that's, you want some history of this continent, that's where you go, and they're all talking about it, and none of them are talking about an ape,
Yeah, they all have stories of a Bigfoot, Sasquatch type creature. They all
Every one of them.
They all have stories of these giant humanoids, and oftentimes they're red-haired giants, and it's weird because if you track the stories from going from Texas and then going westward from tribe to tribe to tribe, they all have these stories of these giants, and
I've got a theory on that.
Yeah,
so go ahead. Please finish.
Oh, I was just saying, their stories are independent of one another, but they all kind of follow the same narrative and show this weird migration from east to west of these giant type creatures, because wherever they went, they were chased off. They went to war.
They fought with them. Lovelock Cave.
They kept getting their ass kicked eastward and further westward.
Right.
So these First Nations peoples, they know what they're talking about, which is why, in my opinion, I'm on the same page. It doesn't really matter if the Patterson-Gimlin film is 100% real or if it's hoaxed, because the fact is, these stories of people encountering these Bigfoot creatures, they predate the Patterson-Gimlin film. It's not like the legend of Bigfoot began with
thousands of years.
Film. It doesn't matter whether it's real or not.
Yeah, some people have made it that's got to be at the forefront of their
the all definer. I have a theory on that, Ant. So I don't believe that let's use the Patterson-Gimlin version of a Sasquatch is the same entity as the red-haired, double-rowed teeth, six-fingered giants that we're talking about here. Those, if I were to believe anything, I don't think they're the same thing. I don't believe they're the same creature. I don't think that. I think if anything was Nephilim descended, it would be the double-rowed teeth, six-fingered, red-haired giant, as opposed to the more less flesh and blood oriented Sasquatch entity. I don't believe that they're the same things. The other thing I always find interesting is when you read these Nephilim stories, right? Bible, lateral text, even look at David and Goliath. None of these, look at the giant of Kandahar story for that matter, right? None of these red-haired giant beings is ever attributed any paranormal ability when they're being talked about. None of them are. They're all giant, ferocious, cannibalistic, flesh and blood monsters. But they're not now you see me, now you don't. And all of a sudden he stepped into a friggin' portal. And you don't hear those stories with that traditional sounding Nephilim descended being. That's not the same thing as what you hear with the Sasquatch people, where there are all these, I saw one and there was 3 orbs circling its head as it walked down the trail. You know what I mean? They're not, the stories are not similar. They're really not. So I've never believed, I believe in things like the giant of Kandahar. I believe in the red-haired giants of Lovelock Cave. I believe those stories, but I don't think they're the same entity. I don't think they're the same thing. I've never have. Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, no, I don't think that they're the same thing either, because you get reports of Bigfoot stepping behind trees that are this thin and then just disappearing. How does that work? But yeah, I mean, that's a good point that you raise, that when you get into encounters of these giant humanoids, it's kind of like Nephilim creatures. Yeah, it's not there's not a whole lot of like interdimensional metaphysical nature.
Not a
being
lot of paranormal stuff that's going on with that, other than they're just gigantic, big, red, 6 fingers and mean as heck. You know, like you don't hear a lot of that stuff. You know, and even in like when they're talking about going into Canaan, and then they're talking about these giants. We were like grasshoppers under them, but they're not talking about and they're magical and they do. You know what I mean? None of that stuff is brought up. And if you're looking for some, and the Bible's got a lot of weird stuff in it, but that's not attributed to those guys. So. Who knows, man? All conjecture, Anthony. Every bit of it.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, though, is that like eyewitness testimony, and I like what you said towards the beginning of this live stream, is that like narrative comparison is like one of the most effective ways that you can try and understand these things, because you can cast all the Bigfoot plaster cast all you want. It's not really doing anything until you talk to people who have actually encountered these things and trying to understand what their story is compared to someone else's story, and build a narrative like that. I mean, that's
the commonalities. Looking, even if there's only 1 in 50 differences, you know what I mean? Like the commonalities to me have always been. The days of like a more forensic style of research, that ship sailed for us a long time ago. We realized that gathering evidence and providing evidence for other people really took a backseat to being more immersed in the experience. Honestly, I believe that my experiences have taught me like the more I try and grow internally and be a better person, I can be sarcastic and I can be malicious and I can be judgy and I can be all those kind of, low vibe human frailties that I suffer from on occasion as well. The more I work on those things internally, in my experience, the more my external experiences with these beings has grown as a result, and so there's a correlation there between, I call it spiritual growth or internal work and internal growth. And that's been the external benefit from it. Not that was what it was supposed to be, but that's been my experience with it. I think the rest, I could speak for the rest of the guys in the Arizona 4 as that being true as well, that spiritual growth has increased our, I won't say understanding of these things, but increased our interaction, Yeah,
I mean, it's like what you put out there, what the energy that you put out there is what you're going to attract.
Agreed. And I talked to Wolf about that earlier. I've always thought what you bring in there is what's going to be reflected back at you. So there were a couple of years ago, we would still occasionally people would find us online or whatever, you know what I mean? And then they want to go out with us, you know what I mean? And we were always kind of hesitant to do that, but we did it a few times. And although we didn't have negative encounters, we had 2 guys that left in the middle of the night, like as fast as like their butts were on fire because they were petrified. Like they had some negative things happen. And one of them, it turns out, was ex-law enforcement. And this dude got told in his head, "You are not welcome here," at like 2:00 in the morning. And he literally, he was gone when we got up the next day. And he emailed one of our guys and said what happened. So we used to, before we would bring anybody out, we go out and have lunch with them, and have a coffee with them, and try and vet them and see what they're all about. And this dude seemed cool. This guy Chuck took him out to lunch and said, let's try him out. We brought him up. Well, he was an ex-law enforcement that had an encounter in the White Mountains, and he'd taken a shot at one of these things. And he didn't tell anybody that before he came out with this. And they knew that. Like they knew, like we don't bring firearms up with us, like we have them in the trucks if we need them, but we don't, like that's not one
of these things previously before.
Yes. Yeah. Like 2 years before he ever met of us or even heard of us. And he'd had like a hunting experience. Remember the nuts and bolts of it. Bottom line was he took a shot at one of these things in the White Mountains on the New Mexico line. And that's probably 80 miles from us. You know what I mean? But for whatever reason, that energy that he brought in made him unwelcome there. And he left in the middle of the night. Another guy did the same thing about a year later. That's kind of when we kind of stopped doing that. Like, it's not our spot to necessarily bring people out anymore. For what? You know what I mean? Really, that's just an ego thing, I think. You know what I mean? Then we don't need it. Doesn't help. Ever brought anything good. Ego reduction has been the the end game, I think, for all of us. You know what I mean? Trying to be right sized, especially when we're out there, but in all ways too. Anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense, but
no, it does. I mean, like it's an example of something that I would call a spiritual opening, and we got Abe Cease in the chat here, and he's always talking about that too. About and he calls it maintaining a heavenly love foundation, which it just means that you paying attention to yourself internally to what spiritual openings are you like, which ones do you have that can be exploited and used against you, because these things are around us at all times, and they're just like watching and waiting for
absolutely take it from a recovering drug addict. I have reveled in all of the wrong things at some period in my life and paid a horrific price for it. You know what I mean? And you're right, like they talk about it in recovery, that alcoholism or addiction is cunning, baffling, and powerful. Well, what does that sound like? That sounds demonic, right? Like that sounds like you just said, frailties that can be exploited if you're not mindful and don't have some, like what Abe would say, some spiritual protection and some discernment about it. And that's the truth. He's got good points. I watch him on occasion. I like Abe. What's up, Abe?
Yeah.
When we talk about these beings, though, too, one of the things that comes up quite a bit, and people ask me this, and you guys were rolling, so I was just kind of sitting here chilling, listening. But there are different types, and the different types of these monstrous beings. The Eliud would be probably the most, like, I think that would be the culprit, would be what the Bigfoot and different offshoots of the Bigfoot would be the Eliud. That would have been the third generation. But in between them and this other generation, you would have had other types of beings. One of them would be the Nephidim, and then another one would be the Nephil, okay? And then you had the Ilio or whatever. These are all different types. And then you have the Raphaim. The Raphaim, now, it's interesting because they are
rock giants, right?
Well, Raphaim are shades of the giants, right? And they are actually deceased beings, and they lived in Sheol, which is like, if you ever read the Epic of Gilgamesh, the ending is pretty bleak. It's like, when they're all just sitting around a table eating ash. They're basically living, their life is it's like a pale comparison of what our life is. It's like they died, and now they're just kind of living as shadows, and they're imitating life until Jesus comes. And then when Jesus comes, he goes to hell or Sheol, depending on the translation, what it is, and he releases the good people. This is weird because it speaks to something that we can't really understand. Now, Jesus says that, the God of this world is not his father, right? He says, and when he confronts the Jewish Pharisees, he says, your father is not my father. He says, your father is Shaitan, which is Satan, and he's the God of this world, but I'm not a part of that. This is not me. And so he goes to Sheol, Hail, whatever you want to call it, and he releases those that are righteous, and then he speaks to those who are, not, they're just kind of neutral, they're there. But then there are some that are really evil, and he leaves them to themselves. But the Raphaim were the giants that had been slain, and they are the shadows of these. Now, here's an interesting thing, and I've wondered about this, and it's interesting that you're on the show with this, because one of the reports that I got near Flagstaff was not of a physical being at all. And 100% it was not. And it was somebody who was coming out of a hotel and saw a black shadow thing walking like a man in the woods right there up near a hill when they were leaving their hotel. Now, the hotel they were at was haunted, but this was not at the hotel. This was down the street. And so this woman and her husband, she says 100%, she goes, it was like a shadow. And when our lights hit it, she goes, it was weird because it was like dusk, right? Kind of a weird time. People report weird stuff around that in-between time. And the lights, she's like, it ate our headlights. You could see it was all black and it was a shadow. But she said it was 9-10 feet tall. And she says, oh, I saw this Bigfoot. It was like a black shadow thing or whatever. And I had told her, I said, well, it could have been a Raphaim. And she was like, I don't know what that is. And I said, well, they're like these giants, but they're like shadow. I think I might have seen one in my house years ago. It was about 10 feet tall. And I told her, I said, these are giant shadows. These are the disembodied Raphaim, or the disembodied giants. They're their own distinct class. They were wiped out, but some of them can be up to like 12 to 15, even 20 feet tall, depending on, who's telling you what they saw. And sometimes in these woods, you'll hear about people talking about these giants, in the woods. They'll call them like, wood giants, or I forgot the names that they'll call them, and they will look like just black shadows. Now, I've had people tell me, there's one person, she was convinced in the Olympic Forest, and we get a lot of stories from Washington, and she's like, these Bigfoot up there, they look like shadows. They just look like shadows. And I told her, I said, that's a distinct, actually, race of beings. But she started believing that they were, well, her daughter and her both believed that they were, and this was up in Washington, not the one in Arizona, that they were the ghosts of these creatures. And so
kind of the same thing.
Maybe the same thing, but maybe not, because the hairy man is its own distinct creature, right?
They die.
Yeah, they do. I mean, you could get into the hominid. Is it a hominem? What is it? It could be. People get confused with that too. Now, that's not really two different things. One is a type of the other, right? We are basically apes according to the classification. We're like apes or whatever, primates, whatever. I don't really like the classification. I don't feel like a monkey. I mean, maybe some people are. I don't know. The people in Philadelphia, when they win the Super Bowl, they act like they go crazy. They're throwing poop and everything.
Planet of the Apes.
Very nasty people, but we're not going to get into people from Philly. We're just saying,
beast mode. They
go into beast mode. Yeah,
we're a breed unto ourselves.
You're damn right you are. There's no going around that. They won the Super Bowl. They would light the city on fire. Most people just have a parade.
We lose the Super Bowl. We light the city on fire. We just like fire.
If you lose, riot. You win, riot.
Yeah.
Riot.
Do you remember when the Phillies lost the World Series in '93 when they had Mitch Williams and they lit his house on fire?
Yeah. Then they had like Lenny Dykstra and some others.
Toronto.
That was horrible, dude. It was like it's like
Dykstra and John Crock, that team.
Horrible team.
But Mitch Williams threw a grapefruit over the plate, and Joe Carter hit it about 1,000 miles out of the arena, and he had a game fix, and then Philly just turned itself upside down for 3 days.
That's why Mitch Williams, they called him Wild Thing.
The Wild Thing. He was burned out.
Yeah, he was
wild until about September.
You know why? Because the Rangers had him, and they only had 2 good pitchers, and they used the shit out of him.
Yeah.
Same thing they did in the late or mid 90s when they had Aaron Seeley and the other guy. They just used them too, and it's like you're not going to go very far with that. They kept getting
that's how the Phillies did it, with good hitting, and they had Kurt Schilling and the Wild Thing until his arm fell off halfway through the season. Then they were screwed.
Yeah, but that
but I digress.
Yeah, Dykstra was something else. Where he was
nails,
kick pin,
great hitter, man. Being crazy though.
Yeah, he was crazy. They called him.
He came close to batting 400 that year.
Well, the steroids would really help you too.
Yep.
That was in his mouth.
That was the juice era.
Well, here's the thing, kind of an off-topic thing, but people always tell you, they'll say, well, you shouldn't waste your brain on like baseball, football, and of course this is hockey right here, and I'm like, dude, if you're smart enough, you can have all these things and have the knowledge of these other, I have all this knowledge of this other stuff and sports. Why not?
I'm the same as you, man. You know what? Mm-hmm. I swear to God, Wolf, like I say this all the time. I have watched people ruin their lives in pursuit of this phenomenon. Like ruin their lives, destroy their careers, destroy their marriages, destroy their relationships with their children. And you know what? I am very, very cognizant. I love this. I mean, I'm passionate about it. It's a huge part of my life. but I like to go out and see a rock band. I like to go to the beach. I love sports still. I'm still a huge Eagles fan. I still love baseball. I grew up in a hockey family. All those things. Like, I make sure that I maintain a balance, because I never want, I have a man whose name I'm not going to say because he's a friend. And he has a really large channel, and he's based out of Colorado. And he, I've watched him. His life is so small, you know what I mean? Like, and it's all in pursuit, every waking day for 12, 13, 14 years. And he's my age. I'm like, man, for what? Like, for what? Like, this is huge. Like, I love hanging out with you guys. I mean, I love this stuff. It's a huge part of my life. But when it becomes the end all, like, you're missing out on something, because I don't know, no matter how much work I put into this or anyone else puts into this, if it's ever going to move the ball forward. I'm not going to be the one that provides the all-knowing answer to everything. That's not going to happen. One of these guys has not yet to come out, sit in the campfire next to us, and break down their truth. I don't think that's happening. I don't think it ever will happen. I'm hopeful. In the meantime, I'm leaving for Mexico on Thursday for 4 days. I'm going to the beach. You know what I mean? Like, I've got other things I'm doing, but whatever. I always say be careful with it, because it's fascinating. It's like all of these topics, when you have experiences with them and you start taking dives down these rabbit holes, they can be all consuming, because they're so unique. They're special. They're cool. They're magical, and that has an enticement to it, and being aware of that. I'm sure when I was younger, this is a way more important part of my life, or more of a driving thing. But I think I still maintain the balance of, I like hanging out with my kids too. You know what I mean? Like, I want all the human good things that we do have answers for. I love all that stuff too. Friendships and all those things, man. I don't hear end at the rant.
If you were to stop and look at the book of Enoch, right, and that's not the only source of this information. There is also the book of Giants, which is incomplete.
Yeah, book of Giants, book of Dreams, book of Enoch. Yeah,
yeah, and they talk about Og. He was this humongous guy, whatever. But here's one. Okay, the Nephilim and the Nephil, two different things, but kind of on the same league, but they're just different generations, right? Here's where it gets kind of interesting, and where we could be looking at what Bigfoot may or may not be. Now, this is just my take on it, and people can poo-poo it all they want, but if you look in the book of Jubilees, which was taken out of the Bible,
right? Yep, Dave Hollis turned me on to that a long time ago.
Oh yeah, and so the book of Jubilees, it talks about the Nephilim, the Nephil, and the Eliud, right? It's the first, second, third generation after the Watchers, right?
Right.
So it would go in that order, right? So what's crazy is you get these other ones that are called the Anakim, and the Anakim and the Raphaim, and you got these like specifically, they're identified as the descendants of the Nephilim, which would be the second generation, right?
Right. That's the Nephilim were the first hybrid.
Yeah, it's the Nephilim, Nephil, and which people get confused and just call Nephilim, which is basically saying that they're of the Nephil, right? So
right.
The Nephil, the Nephilim, the Nephil, and the Eliud, right? So if you look at these three classifications, and then you have offshoots of each one, the Eliud would be the last, but they're often described in different versions of the Bible and of the different Bibles, because there's different ones, right?
Right.
And they're often described as like having hair, and being like wild men. And the Eliud, some of them are depicted as being like a hybridized group of beings. Like, I think that's where you're getting like Goatman, werewolves, all this other stuff. That's what they look like. And I think that because they were experiments, that these people don't realize that there is a spiritual science that we are lacking. We do not have the science behind spirituality, whereas there was a spiritual science that we are now missing.
Yeah,
and when you start getting deep, Yeah, it's been and so when you start going down that rabbit hole, it gets really, really weird. So each generation, though, interbred with other generations and other, whatever. And I think that there were other things that were already here within the earth. Now, here's where it gets really confusing because the Watchers came here supposedly. Now, unless you're going into the Sitchin stuff, what you were talking about earlier, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about biblically.
A lot of similarities anyway.
Yeah, a lot of similarities, but they immediately they went to war with the Titans, which were the original fallen, which were the 72 goetic demons that came. They're archons that fell to earth because of the war in heaven, and their boss Lucifer was imprisoned. Now, I think people get that confused with Lucifer. Like they think, well, maybe that's Lucifer, maybe it's not. It could have been what we call Kronos. But of course, Kronos was the master of time. And the God of this world uses a linear time that we do not have technically in anywhere else in the universe. So if he's imprisoned in Saturn, is a lot to take in, but if he's imprisoned in Saturn and it does reflect off of the moon, which a lot of people believe it does, then it causes us to have sort of weird, mood swings and weird stuff happens.
Right.
So what if that is what's going on? And then, but they had their own offspring and their own children that we don't know about. They don't talk about it. And I think it goes back to the inner earth. I think they are the ones that bred the inner earth. But it was a long lineage that had gone back over and over again, because in the book of Job, which predates Genesis, and I'll wrap it all up with this, the Elohim asked the Shaitan, which are pluralities, and they said, where have you been? They said, walking to and fro upon and within the earth. Right? So if they had made inroads into the earth, and what if there were, generations of things that were here before that? Because there were different yugas, and then there were different sets of yugas. So then there was interbreeding with that's in the earth. Then the fallen do what they do, and they displeased God, and they did all these bad things. You have all of these different types of beings, and they're all interbreeding and interdoing whatever. You really don't know. It gets so convoluted that there's no way to say what a Bigfoot is. If you had a Bigfoot,
agreed. I agree with all of that.
I mean, you could have, and then there are these ones in the Grand Canyon that look like tall natives, but they just have light hair on them. Reddish light hair, and the natives said that they were another tribe of beings. Yes, and they were
Hopis talk about them.
Yeah, so you have that race of beings, and they are 10 feet tall on average, and they're more slender, but they're hairy too, and they live within the earth, but they're living like toward of the top level of the earth.
Right.
So you have that going on in Arizona. So I bet you if you took them, and then you took the Mogollon creature, and you took the one in the Nez Perce, and you took all these different ones, and you took the one in their Flagstaff, and you put them all together, you'd have 4 different types of DNA.
Yeah, completely different entities.
Yeah.
You know what? I think we all definitely agree. There's a lot of other stuff ripping around out there. You know what I mean? There just is. You just went into this huge dissertation, which just always reminds me again that the truth of what we're taught about where we live and what we are and the reality is so obfuscated and different. I don't know that I have seen enough, not just in the Sasquatch phenomenon, but I'm a huge petroglypher, and I'm big into native ruins and all those things. I mean, I've done it all in Mexico and all through the Southwest, everywhere, And I've been to petroglyph sites which would indicate knowledge of genetics. I've seen things that would indicate alternative historical narratives that definitely should. Like, I've been to this site in Utah, up north of St. George, that has it's like a natural temple, and it's a huge petroglyph site. But it was pointed out to me by a woman who grew up there that was a Paiute, that some of this stuff meant, and she broke down this 17-panel petroglyph that was written from right to left, like it would have been done in Hebrew, that was literally the entire Genesis story, from a depiction of God, the Garden of Eden, two figures fleeing with their hands in the air, one of them with a penis. I mean, this thing goes to the same two figures tilling their own fields. The organics that were taken from the etchings on these petroglyphs were carbon dated at 300 AD. So that's impossible according to whatever narrative we're taught. How would natives inscribing these petroglyph panels have knowledge of Genesis, 800, 900 years before a Western European ever set foot from what we're taught on North America? It's obviously the Mormons are like, yes, we told you so. I mean, like, what I'm saying is that shouldn't be there, but it's there, and it's not subjective, because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it really can't be anything else. You know what I mean? So It goes to your point, who knows? I would love to have like the true book of Earth's history. You know what I mean? Let's all have that printed. You know what I mean? And we'll start from there.
and the history would be 4.6 billion years old, 4.5 or whatever. The
nuclear events, all of it,
That Paiute story is interesting because they talk about the red-haired giants in the cave.
Oh, yeah, man.
And they had to burn them out and all this stuff. You get these really weird stories, man. And for whatever reason, they spoke the same language, And when the different tribes, like the Choctaw, they had their own encounters with these beings in the east, and when they went west, they drove them further west, and then they encountered them again, and because these beings they're there, and we know that not just in the Book of Jubilee, but there's another one, and I believe it's the Anakites. When they talk about the Anakites, they were what Joshua and Caleb's spies for the Israelites. They saw the Canaanites, which this was specifically the Anakites, and that they were the descendants. They called them the descendants of the Nephilim. So when you read this, it talks about how they were.
How would they know that? How would they even know that term?
Yeah, exactly. And they do describe it as that. Yeah, and it goes back to Numbers. But in different translations, different books, this comes up again and again, and that they were confronted with the Anakites, who are a type of Nephilim. And Dick Richards says Anakim. Yeah, Anakim and Anakites, two different things. The Anakim are another type. Now that's what I'm saying. It gets really weird. It gets kind of convoluted. And if you've read all these apocryphals, you'll start to get they can kind of swirl around in your head and get a little, but whatever. But not all of these. The books in the Ethiopian Bible, there's 88 of them.
Yeah, right? Yeah, including all of Enoch.
Yeah, and then it just keeps on going and whatever. But we've reached 2 hours, man, and I appreciate you coming on,
brother. I had a blast. It was great. We haven't done it in a while. It's good to sit down with you guys, man. I told you I've had the flu. Like, I never get sick, and I was down for the count for about 9 days. Today I was just starting to feel better. And when you called, and Linda said to me, "I think that's exactly what you need. You need to get a little fire under your butt, and this is a good way to do it. Sit down with Wolf tonight." So I'm really glad we did, man.
Well, it was a good show, and I just thought, I knew it was going to be a banger, and I just thought it would be, instead of relegating it to 500 to 1,000 people, I'd rather do it for everybody, But because we'll be right back next Tuesday on the Patreon. Don't forget, guys, next week. So this was Arizona. We go back east, right, Anthony? What did we decide? We're going to go to Alabama.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
We go to Alabama.
We got a friend down there, don't we?
We do. We got old Bettina down there. We could maybe get her to come on and tell us some crazy stuff. Maybe I'll get her to come on the Patreon. I probably get her.
You know what? I'll reach out to her and put the screws on her and see if she does it, man.
Tell her to come out there for old time's sake and hang out.
She's tough these days, pal. She's living life. I talked to her about a month ago. I try and stay in touch with her. She's busy. She's got a happy life. She's happy these days. It's all that really matters.
A couple weeks for me since I talked to her, but she definitely is trying to stay out of that black cube. I get it. It is.
Buddy, I don't know anybody that's walked through it better than you have. I don't, I mean, you had your support. Obviously, I've been in this corner since day one, but nobody does it better, kid. Really, nobody does this better. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. You guys just do a great job for all the right reasons, and I am grateful to be part of this community. I love all of you guys. I'm still a little sick, and I'm going to lay down and go to bed, though, man.
Some sleep, brother.
All right, pal. Love the Nelly. And good to see you. Talk to you guys soon, man. Peace out, brother.
Chris Kramer, everybody. Great guy. Chris is a good guy. We've been friends for a long time, and big compliment coming from him. He's an OG in this field. He's been in this field a long time. And so I just wanted to bring him on, and in light of what's going on and what started here in Austin, of course, some weirdness, started here in Austin with these guys. Like I said, Mark Evans. I'm not going to attack Mark. I don't know Mark personally. I know nobody in that camp. But if I would have known that was going on, literally my friend's club is right down the road from where they did that. I should have went down there and just went over there if I would have known. And I could have confronted these people with our cameras and started yelling in their face like Alex Jones, "What do you know about Bigfoot? They're turning the freaking Bigfoot's gay." And I could have just done all that and been like, Alex is actually, he's really come along now. I'm proud of him. I never thought he would. We used to tease each other at the public access, and now he's doing good. He's actually, he's in the camp that he needs to be in. He's
stop speaking in code.
He's telling it like it is, and he's just, but I think that this is what's happening. That this is a new thing going on here with the Patterson Gimlin film, but I think this one's a little different because this guy did get family members of Patterson. I've always believed that Patterson hoaxed it. I've never, over the last few years, I've never backed down from that. And I got to say, there's a few other people there that have always agreed with me. Somebody that I don't talk to anymore. I don't get along with them anymore from Kentucky. We don't talk anymore, But he was always right there with me on that. He didn't believe in it. Abe is another one. He didn't believe in it. We've never backed down from that over the last several years. Once I made my decision, like looking at it over and over again and studying it. But to me, it doesn't matter to me. It's almost like I don't really have a dog in this fight. I don't care if it's real or if it's not.
No,
I don't.
It doesn't make a difference.
But if it doesn't, some of these people, this is the proof, the absolute holy grail that Bigfoot exists. So it kind of rocks their world. But those are the apers that have to worry and panic about that. And unfortunately, I got a bunch of friends that are apers. Ryan Edwards, is another one. I want to reach out to him and see what he thinks about this, and get these people to come on and talk. And I would love to do a show. I'm going to invite several people. If you're out there listening, I want to get Ken Gerhardt. Talk to Ken Gerhardt about it. And I want to bring people on from the different camps. And I want to see what everybody's take is on this. Doesn't matter what I think. Who cares, right? Y'all already know. If you're a paratrooper, you know what I think. I don't care. What's going on? But they're going to release that probably on one of these paid channels or whatever. And they're, oh, look at this now. His relatives are saying that it was fake. I mean, like, what does it matter? What about Dick Richards? What do you think, Richard? Is it fake? Do you think it's fake? Tell me in the comments, everybody that's in the comments. We still got 276 people. Tell me what y'all think in the comments. Is it fake? Do you think it was a fake? I think it was a fake. That doesn't mean that Gimlin was in on it. I think Gimlin could have been taken for a ride too. Everybody that I know that talks about Gimlin speaks very highly of him. And I know, I'm not joking. I probably know at least 100 people.
Yeah, I've never heard anyone say a cross word about Bob
Not
Gimlin,
at all.
ever.
I've never spoken out against him. I have spoken out against Jeff Meldrum. And I know Jeff probably didn't like me. Well, Matt Moneymaker probably doesn't like me. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. We've corresponded a couple times, whatever. But guy, that tries to tell me that I saw a Bigfoot, you know what I mean? I don't really agree with that. And then tells you that this is the Holy Grail. This is what it is. And, that right there will tell me, okay, you have no credentials to tell me what the hell it was that I saw or didn't see when you believe in that film. I got friends that believe in it. I don't know. So Don says, I don't think it's fake. Ronan says, absolutely fake.
Diversity of opinions, yeah.
Dell says it's not a fake. I don't know. And then Robin says, I always thought it was, and I don't know what to believe. And, you know, in Abe, there's Abe. He says it's fake, you know. I mean, a lot of people don't know. Mickey G says, she don't know what, I'm not sure anymore. I mean, who knows? I mean, what are your, I don't even know if I've ever asked you point blank, Anthony, what are your thoughts on that? Let's ask you, what do you think?
I mean, I don't really put a whole lot of stock into it, particularly because Roger Patterson, you say he was a former carny, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, like, okay, whenever whenever there's like a financial incentive to hoax something and someone's a former carny, I mean, like, these are not, carnies don't have a reputation for being people you can really, trust, I mean, like, I'm just saying. So I think that the motivations have to be considered. And like I said, anytime I've ever heard anyone speak about Bob Gimlin, they've had nothing but positive things to say about him. Most, if not all, of like some of the really heavy hitters within the Bigfoot community vouch for him. So I agree with you on that. I don't think Bob Gimlin was in on any sort of chicanery. But one of the things that keeps coming up though from people who really believe that the Patterson Gimlin film is legitimate is like, well, why put breasts on it? I'm like, if I put myself in the shoes of someone who's trying to make like a Bigfoot costume, for shits and giggles, I mean, it's like, I'm a dude. I mean, it's like, why not? Like, it's not really like that. It's not too much of a stretch to be like, hey, let's put some boobs on this thing. It'd be funny, I mean, and then also, like, some people are saying like, well, the costume technology was not there back then. I don't really, I mean, I don't believe that. Like, what do you mean costume technology? You can make a costume that looks convincing, back then too. It's not, I mean, this was not that long ago. But like I said, it's really kind of irrelevant to me. It doesn't really matter whether that film was real or hoaxed, because the legend of Bigfoot, these encounters, predate the Patterson Gimlin film. So it really just it makes no difference. Like, you still have centuries upon centuries of folklore about this creature, about, like, no matter who your ancestors are, wherever you descend from ethnically or regionally, your ancestors have tales of these ape-like creatures in their past. So that's what we should be focusing on. Like, that's what you should base, whether or not you believe in the existence of this creature. You should base it on that and not on one film that may or may not be legitimate.
Yeah, we would be remiss if we just said, hey, I'm basing this on, one film. I'm not ever going to do that. I'm not going to sit there and go, I think it's because of this, this, and that, and it's because of this movie. That's just impossible. I can't wrap my mind around that. There are people who will, absolutely choose to die on the hill that they're on. But there's people that say that the people that actually base a lot of what they are doing, whatever they're doing, is based upon that. You're not too smart if you can't figure out another way to come at it. Because I've had to rethink my stance on things, and I didn't feel like, oh shit, I'm trapped, I'm cornered, I have to do this. Oh my gosh. Because if I don't, then I'm just screwed. I don't buy into that, dude. Mm-mm. So I guess, in conclusion, he's fixing to go jump on and do what he's going to do. I guess in conclusion, for me, it doesn't really matter. But I hope you guys enjoyed this special installment, and I could have just put it on the Patreon and not showed you, but I wanted Kramer to come on and talk about this stuff that's going on here, and then we could also hit the Arizona. But believe me, there's other things that have happened in Arizona. Right? Here's what I'm going to tell you. Tomorrow night, there's going to be, this may be a controversial show. I don't know. I mean, but it's a dog man and a Bigfoot square off. Who wins? I don't know. We're going to get into it, and we may just have to, you, the audience, decide what you think. I don't know. But this supposedly happened in Mississippi and one of the national forests there, and 2 people claim to have witnessed this. And we'll see what happens tomorrow night. Dogman and Bigfoot, they were in the same area, and something happened. Show up. Be here tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. But right now, what do you guys want? If you guys are up for it, I mean, it's a Tuesday night. I don't know if you got the kids that go to school tomorrow. You got to go to bed or whatever. I was thinking about going on for 30 minutes or something. And, yeah, Chris, great having you on too, man, for sure. And we love you too. And everybody in the chat, we love all of you. Good people, great people. But I can do a short, people are asking me about the war. So should we do one? Should we go to Random Files and talk about it?
Yeah, sure.
Because today, guess what happened? Someone resigned. So things aren't exactly going according to plan with the war. So yeah, we'll go on and jump on, and we'll do maybe 30 to 40 minutes or something, and then we got to go, and then Abe's going to be doing his show. So I got to get out of here, but let's go ahead and go to Random Files. We'll set it up, and we'll talk about it. We'll bring you what I know, the truth and the real reality, because the media is a bunch of liars, and that's the truth. All right, guys, we'll see you. We'll see you over there.
As I travel this life alone, 2 paths both unknown, for what already has this life shown. First step, I diverge from normalcy. No paper cut out life for me. I did it my way, not much more to say. A road less traveled, dark and cold. I came upon a fork in the road. I pondered, both mind free. Fall had come, for yellow is the autumn tree. Both I long to travel, for I'm but one. I could not see, for both were bent, the overgrowth and canopy. Where will destiny first step, I diverge from normalcy. No paper cut out life for me. I did it my way, not much more to say. I began my journey on the road less traveled. Regret haunts me at times, looking back wondering where the other path myself would find. But both paths are traveled equally for many take the zombie road to normalcy, and others seek individuality. From the wear on the trail it appears 50-50. With every footstep came pitfalls and risks, rewards and opportunities. Looking back, what did I really miss? The first step I diverged from normalcy. No paper cut out life for me. I did it my way, not much more to say.